things up ahead of time. What's nice about adding rates is that you can add multiple ones, starting at different dates. So if you have a bunch of different rates and your new rate agreement comes in and you know that as of July 1 it's changing to something else, you can put that in the system now so that as of July 1, 2010, it'll start using that rate on new proposals. It also allows you to keep archived rates in there that are basically not being used anymore, but you can see what previous rates were used at for indirect costs. And you can set these up. This is set up right now for just research F&A, but of course you can set it up for all of the different rate types, for instruction, other sponsored activity, or other areas that might apply to your school, like clinical trials, for instance, might have a specific rate. The institute rate is the rate that's added by your school, assumed to be the rate that's on your indirect cost rate agreement. The applicable rate is what you can change for this proposal only. So the example there might be if I'm using a training grant rate, for instance, if this is an NIH training grant and I'm limited to 8%, I can change this to 8% and it'll use that for this proposal only, and it will not modify the table rate for every other proposal. The same is true of fringe benefits. Is a place for you to add the ERE rates for your school when they're applicable and what they're for. The different appointment types that they might be for. It also allows you to set the applicable rate just like the F&A rate does, so that if you have a sponsor that doesn't allow ERE, for instance, you can exclude it on this budget only. For inflation rates, you can set inflation, like default inflation, for every single budget category if you choose to, or you can set it for the entire budget. So if some items are going to have different inflation rates than others, you can set those all up, including with start dates where those are applicable. With the applicable rate, same as indirect costs and fringe benefits, you can change that if there's a reason to for this proposal. The vacation rates and other are some things that we've set up just for test purposes. Some schools use these kinds of rates for service centers, and that's why these are in here just as an example. But they basically work the same as any of the other rates we've seen thus far. You can add them when you configure the application. They can be changed on a proposal-by-proposal basis if necessary. The summary page is basically a read-only version of the budget and the items that we've added to the budget so far, so that you can basically keep a running look of what items you've added to the budget. And you can use this edit button to go into the appropriate panel to change those items if you need to. But we'll go ahead and take a quick look at personnel. Personnel is probably the most complex part of the budget. There are a lot of things going on for adding people to the proposal. One of the things it does, and I'll go ahead and open all these panels so that we can move back and forth, is it'll bring forward the people that you've added to the proposal back on the proposal key personnel page that we saw earlier. So since I created this budget, I added one person and he doesn't show up yet. So what I need to do is click this sync personnel button and it should bring him back. For PIs and co-PIs and key personnel, the best way to add them is on that key persons page so that you can get them pushed into the budget in the appropriate fashion, and also so that if this is a grants.gov proposal, they'll show up in the right place on the XML forms when it gets transmitted. But otherwise, you can add PI, non-PI, non-COI, non-key personnel from this page directly. So it brings in Dominic Nugent. I need to add a code for him, so I'll just do that really quickly. With the salaries, right now in the test system, I'm adding salaries, of course, but the assumption is that most schools will pull this information from their HR system so that salaries will come in automatically. Okay, so I've added Dominic. I have his salary. One of the things it will do is bring him down to this panel so I can actually add a line item for him. This part up here, this basically shows me who I have to choose from to add to the budget, but it hasn't actually added him with any effort or any salary or fringe benefits yet, not until I go down here and add him for detail. It allows me to add an object code for him, which is basically driven by this job code, just a way of refining down the job codes and the object codes as a combination help determine what the fringe benefit rate calculation is, so that certain job codes are tied to certain specific object codes, so someone really can't make the wrong choice for a person. And again, if you're pulling in information from your HR table, a lot of this stuff would already be populated for you, and a user wouldn't have to make those choices. So what it's done is it's brought in Dominic, start and end date. It assumes the start and end date for the budget period that I'm working in, but I can change this so that if I know he's not going to start until 6 months in, I can change the dates and it'll prorate the salary and fringe benefit calculations accordingly. I'll go ahead and add him. It allows me to collect a number of pieces of information here. The percent effort, like I've done for the PI, and the percent charge. When those are equal, there's no cost sharing. But for this second person, I added 50% effort, but only 25% charged. And that means there's cost sharing, and I'll show you where that shows up a little bit later. But we'll go ahead and we'll just say he's 100%. And we'll calculate his salary and fringe. And it does take into account things like inflation, if inflation is turned on. And so if I go into year 2 and year 3, this amount will be captured with inflation. If I show you a few more details, I can turn inflation on or off for this category. I can make it on or off campus. Shows the cost sharing for this J. Houlihan person here. Gives me the number of persons that I have in this cost category of faculty salaries. And it shows the different rates that are applied to this area. So the indirect cost rate will show up later in the budget summary, but it shows that there's employee benefits and what the MTDC base is here. Oh, excuse me, the rate. I apologize. And one of the other things I can do aside from the key personnel is adding additional people, both employees who are not key personnel and even to be named employees. So if I do this search, I can perform a lookup against a list of common to be named or to be hired positions where I don't know who the person is, but I know I need to add them in the budget. And I can bring back one or more of these by clicking on one of the boxes and clicking Return Selected. And that'll just bring back the research associate that I just added. And I can add in the salary for that person and create a budget line for them just as I did for this third person here. So I'll save that and then we'll move on to non-personnel. The non-personnel budget page has all of the obviously non-personnel categories like equipment and travel, operational expenses, and items like that. And it's grouped together in the same kind of grouping structure that you've seen throughout the application, where items are added via a tab of common items. So I have, here a quick budget overview that shows all the costs I've added to date, what my cost sharing is. And it also breaks things down into different areas. Like for equipment, I can add all the equipment items I need to this panel. I can select an object code, and again, object codes are configurable by your institution so that you can put those names in there for items that make sense for your school. And I can add this item. I'm just going to buy a really expensive lab coat. And I can add it to the budget. It'll change this item here to two line items, and it then adds my line item below. All of the rest of the panels work exactly the same, where I can add an item using a particular object code name. And another thing that's common with all of these tabs and the different groupings is these line item details. So I can change the start and end date for this cost if I need to. I can choose not to apply inflation. And applying inflation, becomes important later when we generate the rest of the budget. One of the things that KC will do is allow you to create a year 1 budget and then generate the future years based on that budget. It uses inflation to calculate the out year costs. But you might say, okay, I have travel in year 1, but I'm going to maybe have travel in year 2, but I don't want to apply inflation to it. So when I add this into year 2, it'll just calculate the same cost without applying inflation. One of the other things that these non-personnel items do, and it does it in personnel as well, you'll see the same basic structure for the line item details, is allow you to